Tigers are back. We're on a roll, 2 in a row coming off the bye, which is what we needed to do to kickstart the back half of our year. On to bigger and better things this week facing the Giants. And to discuss that plus more, we've got 2 brand new guests on tonight. Our first guest is Sparty. Welcome to the show, mate.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. As we always ask our new guest, how did you first become a Richmond supporter?
Probably the same old story most people have. Family, very heavily, tradition of being Richmond supporters, particularly my old man and my grandfather back in the day, as he was a policeman and actually knew a lot of the players at the time who were policemen, obviously working on the other side of playing footy. And just grew up surrounded by Richmond people. And while it's made me emotionally stronger, I think, as a human being through a lot of the hard years, obviously, it all pays off when we win the flag in 2017. We see some success now. So, yeah, that's pretty much how I become Richmond, just all through family and all the emotions that come along with it.
It's one thing that no one can ever deny is that it's always a character-building thing being a Richmond supporter. When you've gone through the amount of shit that we've been through, not much will bother us outside of that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. In all facets of life, you just feel so much stronger to take on anything when you know you've lived through probably. I remember the Geelong game, 157 points was probably the worst game I've seen us play at Marvel. So
yeah,
if I can sit through that, I can almost sit through anything.
Absolutely, everything else is just a complete nothing compared to some of those losses.
Yep.
And our second guest on tonight is actually a mate of Sparty's. We've got Trindacut. Welcome to the show.
G'day, Michael. Thanks for having me.
No drums at all. And same question to you. How did you become a Tiger supporter?
Yeah, much the same, mate. My mum indoctrinated me from a young age, singing the song in the car at 1 year old, and never had a chance to barrack for anything else.
That's the way to go. So they'll brainwash from really early on.
Yep, passing on the tradition too. I've got two young kids that are both avid Richmond supporters. They don't know it yet, but they will.
Now, was there any competition to try and sway them any other way?
No, no. My wife's American, so she doesn't follow AFL.
Oh, perfect.
So no competition at all.
Free range. That's good. Has she converted herself? Has she taken much interest in the game at all?
Yeah, she's come along to a few. We got along to Essendon, Richmond this year. She came along to that, so she knows what's going on now at least. Out
of interest, how hard do you find it to explain the rules to her, being that she doesn't know the background of it? Because I just think that these days it's hard enough for us to understand, let alone trying to explain it to someone else who hasn't seen it before.
She's picked it up pretty quickly, to her credit. I think just the fact that I always have football on and just sort of exposure over time. I mean, Dane Sparty got me back into footy about 10 or 11 years ago, and I was a complete footy nuffy back then, and it's taken 10 years to sort of get myself into some pretty good understanding of what's going on, and she's done pretty well for 5 or 6 years that she's been following it, but some things just completely foreign to her as to how it works, because she's only followed things like ice hockey and NFL over there, so...
Yep.
But she's got there in the end.
Very good. Before we get into it, obviously big news today with David Asprey and Camden McIntosh extending their contract, staying at the club until the end of 2021, which is fantastic news. And every time I see players re-sign or extend contracts with us, I always get taken back to the point in time when we signed Tom Lynch, and everyone in the media was just like, they're never going to sign any of their other players, they're going to lose everyone, mass walkout. And you just can't help but laugh every time we manage to keep someone. But those two guys have been pretty important this year. And I think Asprey probably come under the most fire, maybe not so much this year and last year, but everyone thought he was expendable because we had Rance. And then when we don't have Rance, it now becomes more evident as to how structurally important he is to our side.
He's certainly lifted all the guys at the back have done, I think. I mean, we've had some losses this year, some pretty bad losses, but I feel like the boys up there have lifted to fill that hole and lifted quite admirably.
Yeah, and I think that the one that stands out for me is the Adelaide game. For me, I think, and it might be a very simple view, and I said it before in a previous episode, but if Asprey plays on Walker or Jenkins instead of Garthwaite, I reckon we win that game. There's no way he lets them kick 5 or 4 goals each.
No, exactly right. Like, I actually always think back as, pretty much we almost lost him when we almost traded him up to Brisbane. We went and had an interview up there, and at the time, as you said, we probably thought he was probably a little bit more expendable, and he hadn't actually solidified his role down back, and he actually came to us as a forward as well. If we think back that far back, so and kind of as Trindacut said, like, he's definitely solidified his role up there, and I'm looking forward to this week, because last time we had Garthwaite playing on the likes of Cameron, and
that's right.
He ended up kicking, I think 7. I think he was against us, so might be a very different story this week. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely.
And Cameron hasn't been in the form that he was leading into that game as well. So hopefully we can keep him contained this weekend.
And Camden McIntosh, he's probably been at some points in his career a bit of a whipping boy for Richmond people, but I reckon this year that it's been his best year of his career. I think the consistency in his game is very good, playing on the wing. He's a little bit chaotic, but sometimes that plays into our hands as well. But just his athleticism, his strongness over the ball, aerial marking, some of the ridiculous passes he pulls off, and okay, sometimes they don't come off, but yeah, I think this has been his best year so far, and good on him for getting an extension.
Yeah, exactly right. Particularly, once again, thinking back when he first started, he came out of the blocks running. I think he might have even gotten the Rising Star nomination that first round against Carlton. He was absolutely unbelievable. And I think that's probably where a lot of supporters actually hold him to quite a high standard of knowing of straight away we've seen how good he was. He almost didn't have that time to develop slowly, I guess. But yeah, he's definitely been probably one of our more consistent players over the last couple of years, and whether it be even the premiership year in recent years or this year, he's definitely has created a lot more consistency in his games. That's for sure.
He's been one of only 3 players this year to play every game, which Sparty actually pointed out to me earlier today when he got signed on from a few years, but. He's certainly been consistent this year, and again, without Rance, he's one of the boys that have stepped up and really filled that hole and provided some consistency down back that we really needed.
I reckon if we were to stop and do our best and fairest right now, he'd be in the top 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Which is a credit to himself.
I think purely because he's played every game as well. That
does help.
When you've got Cochin out and Edwards missing a couple of games, yeah, definitely.
So, with some of our best players out for chunks of games too, not just 1 or 2, he'd be right up there.
And what about the big game on the weekend that we had against Gold Coast? Richmond 23-12, 150, defeated the Suns 9-4-58, winning by 92 points. Apparently some weren't happy with that, but we'll push on. Sparty, what did you make of the game? Bashing my head against the wall sometimes with things like that. But, a 92-point win's a 92-point win at the end of the day. You've got to... Realistically, if you kick 100 points in a half, very strong probability that you're not going to do it again the second half. It just doesn't happen like that. So
exactly right.
The expectations that some people had were just borderline ridiculous. We improved our percentage, and that was a great outcome, which we needed to do. But... yeah, I thought the boys played really well. That first half was some of our best football for a while.
Yeah, it kind of brought in memories back once again to the premiership year when we went over and played Fremantle over there and absolutely smashed them. And that's we aren't a team. We've never really been a team to go out and really pump sides by 100+ points. It's just not really in our nature. We seem to just do what we need to do to get the win a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, you kind of saw that, particularly through the first half. They set the game up. Then all they needed to do was sit back, just manage the rest of the game, and they still ended up winning. By a greater margin than they had at half time. So, albeit it was only like 10 points or something, but. They were able to manage that second half really well, and probably the biggest highlight for me was seeing players like Castagna, obviously wasn't a big part of that big push for the 100 points in the first half. He stepped up, allowed others to kind of take a step back, manage their maybe manage their loads a little bit more and actually pop up and kick 5 goals and almost take best on ground. So I think a really good team effort overall, that's for sure.
I think it does a lot to a win like this will bring some form to some players that have probably been a little bit on the fringe, but have held their spot due to the numerous injuries we've had. And also with 7 players coming back last week, I think it was, and just getting a little bit of another run on them like that. I mean, I think it would be just as valuable to have a close win, which we might get this weekend, but it's there's a lot of benefit to come from just being able to get the whole 22 to gel right and to get the process working well and to get a big score and get the reward for effort against a admittedly poor opponent in the Suns.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, just to help create that synergy again that Hardwick's talking about with all these players coming back, that was a perfect setup for that, and just as good preparation coming into the next couple of weeks, which are a lot harder. I mean, I know the Gold Coast last and London didn't give much of a yelp, but outside of our game, they've typically actually been a pretty good defensive side and pretty stingy. So it actually was a good performance when you look at even Geelong struggled to score against them. They're very good at stoppages and bottling it up. So the fact that we were able to open them up the way we did was a pretty impressive facet of the game, I think.
I think probably one of the more underrated players of the game on the weekend, or maybe not underrated, but Shane Edwards has not been played the same way we have in years past. I think he's probably due to injuries, I guess, been forced to sort of down back a bit more. But he was one of our best, if not the best, score assist players in the last few years for the Tigers, and he was a big part of that on the weekend. And it was good to see him back up there again. I think him playing up forward gives us another extra few goals every game.
Yeah, that's a good call. His creativity with his hands is elite. We all know that. I don't think a lot of other teams have cottoned onto it just yet. But yeah, his ability to free up space is pretty exceptional. Just a couple of the notes on our scoreline. Last week was the 3rd time we've scored over 100 points this season, and interesting enough that we've actually now gone back-to-back for the first time scoring 100 points plus, which I think is I know we've played St Kilda and Gold Coast, so I get that, but we haven't scored over 100 points against other lower sides as well, so I think it's a good sign of our intentions in the back half of the year. It's the highest score for the season so far, in a year where it's at a 50-year all-time low. That's a really good sign. And it's also the 2nd week in a row we've won the contested possession. We won it by plus 16. That's been a big bugbear of mine. We've been getting smashed in that area for a long time now. And I think there's been a bit of a conscious effort to turn that number around because it plays a pivotal part in getting good results.
It'll certainly be important for us to try and get a win with a contested possession game this weekend because that's the Giants' style of play is to win the contested possession. I think even though they lost in the weekend, they still won the contested possession amount by a really healthy amount.
I reckon Cochin is raring to go for this week, and particularly with the contested possession, he looked absolutely amazing last week.
He was clean. He was as clean as I've seen him for a long time.
What I liked about his game last week was he was disciplined. He went hard for the ball and hard at the man with the ball, but didn't give away those stupid free kicks he was doing against St Kilda. The Cochin of last week is perfect. Yep.
100%. If he brings any of that pressure that we know he can put in, particularly during the finals campaign, that intensity of the ball, and it just shows that it was probably having some sort of niggles throughout the first half of the year, and he took a bunch of weeks off, and look, last week all those free kicks he's kind of given away. You almost put a bit of rust coming back into the side, and look, 2 weeks back to playing, he looked absolutely raring to go. So particularly against a really good midfield in GWS this week, really, really looking forward to seeing him have a really strong performance.
And what did you guys make of Bolton's game? I thought he was close to best on ground, and I really loved the fact he was getting some midfield minutes because that's where he's been doing his best work in the VFL, and it was really nice to see that translate to his AFL game.
I certainly like seeing him play in the midfield more. He's a bit of a. I feel like he adds a bit of an unknown, spark. So oppositions would have a bit of trouble lining up on him. In my thoughts.
I think his skill has he's starting to reach that AFL level as well. He's kind of been on the fringe where his skill execution hasn't been probably up to the level of AFL over the recent years. He's shown some really good signs, particularly playing as a small forward. But yeah, his ability to hit a target now at AFL level has gotten a lot better. And yeah, he definitely showed a lot of those signs. And if he keeps building up his body a little bit more, his endurance and his ability to win the ball, then yeah, he can be a very, very valuable player for us. Across that half forward and in midfield for sure.
I don't know if you guys. Go on.
I have to admit, it surprised me to see him play that kind of role and do so well at it. I just thought he'd end up being another one of the sort of mosquito fleet up forward, but he's really thrived in the midfield. And I think the injuries have given him that opportunity too, which while he may not be there now, as Sparty was saying, in the future, along with Sydney Stack and some of the other boys have gotten a run. Eggsy as well had a good run on the weekend, but it's a promising signs going forward if we can find talent like we have been and get them a good run in the middle like Bolton.
And I can't understand. A lot of people are putting his name up as a possible omission for this week for Jack. It just blows my mind that people would say that after the kind of game he's just put out there.
I would have thought Markov would find his way out of the side as good as he's been. I don't see that. It would be insane, I think, for Bolton to. I mean, I've just had a bit of a look at his stats while you mentioned it. He said 9 contested possessions and 26 possessions overall and 2 goals and just a huge influence on the game.
Yeah, he couldn't have done much more.
I don't see anyone getting dropped with that kind of contribution.
You'd be real stiff if you got dropped after a performance like that.
You'd be shitty. You'd have every right to walk into the coach's office and ask for a please explain, I reckon. The play probably
at the same time though, like it's almost the strength of the side if you're getting dropped on that kind of performance. If it's probably a good thing for the team overall. But yeah, I'd expect him to keep his spot. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And we obviously had a debutant on the weekend, Derek Igmalisi-Smith. I didn't know a lot about him, to be fair, because I think he was out with injuries a lot of his first year at the club. But his form this year in the VFL has been quite good, and I thought his debut game. He showed a bit. His first contest, it was a bit shaky, as you could expect, but ended up with 19 disposals at 79%. He gained 404 metres and had 7 contested possessions. I thought he looked pretty sturdy when he had the ball, and he made a lot of good decisions down back.
He's got a great name, Derek. He's a good... I had to look him up. I didn't know who he was when he was named in the team, so I had no idea. I don't think I was the only one that had to do that, but it's a good start, particularly when you don't know who they are, and they come in and they sort of put the Jets on and get a lot of the ball and influence the game as well as they have. That's a great start. And just, again, like Sydney Stack earlier in the year, and Bolton played last year, but he's got a good run this year, a better run. It's great to see good talent come into the side.
I think not only that, but I'm pretty sure he's the first player who's actually come through our Next Generation Academy as well.
Yep.
And I think that's a really good sign that obviously we're able to produce some really good players through that avenue. If he's obviously the first of hopefully many coming from the NGA. So, but also probably credit to our system as a our whole football system, that a debutant can come in and have that kind of performance playing off a halfback. As Trindacut mentioned before, we've had blokes like Sydney Stack come in and do very similar. Funnily enough, against GWS earlier this year, playing off that halfback role, and we have a lot of faith in our players to be able to go out and do the role, and obviously the communication and understanding of what's expected and the performance levels and roles within the team are really clear that anyone can come in and do that and take the opportunities when they're there, that's for sure.
I was talking about this with a mate the other day, and it honestly all boils down to the fact that we've been able to establish our own VFL side, and the club needs to be heavily commended for that, because realistically, if that didn't happen, this kind of transformation and plays coming in and out seamlessly doesn't happen, because you're having to play by Coburg's kind of structure if we were affiliated with them, for example. You look at how good Hawthorn and Geelong have been, and for so long. It is because simply they've got their own standalone team, and one person went out, someone else come in. They knew the structure, they knew the game plan, and it worked seamlessly. And I think a massive pat on the back to the club for taking the punt on doing a standalone VFL team, but it's honestly been the best thing that's happened for us.
What year did we bring in our own VFL team? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, good question. I'd say probably, I'm going to take a stab, maybe 2012, 2013.
Because I think another really important part of our we're bearing fruits from changes made also to our development staff a few years ago, particularly I think at the end of 2016. After that year, and we've haven't put a foot wrong since then in respect to the names we're bringing into the side. We've played the most players this year due to injury, and there hasn't been too many or any disappointments really. They've all at least had a crack or had a couple of good games if they've then gone back to the VFL.
But as you said, definitely the strategy to obviously implement the VFL side, and obviously we've had Richmond reserves in the past, and then we went through the years where we had the affiliation with Coburg, and definitely the conversation at the time was around, well, hang on a second, we aren't getting the same sort of communication in terms of what our expectations and the kind of roles that our players, what we want them to be doing at that level. So obviously, put in a lot of work to obviously get the VFL side up and running. And look, as I said, we're bearing the fruits of that strategy now, where if any player drops down to the VFL, they're able to slot into that team, or whether they're coming from the VFL into the AFL team. Once again, they're able to slot into those roles perfectly because we operate, almost side by side within the same system. And once again, I love to look back at the grand final year. You look at even after the grand final, every player as part of the system, AFL, VFL, were in the rooms singing the song, celebrating because it's all one team, all collectively looking after one goal. And kind of as you said, Michael's before about those strong sides, the Hawthorns, Geelongs, and the Western Bulldogs as well, have been another one where their VFL side and AFL side have been really strong. I think they might have won the VFL premiership or maybe lost in the grand final, similar to us in that grand final year when they won the flag. So
I think they lost by a point, or they lost the week beforehand, so they missed out on the grand final by a point. I can't quite remember. We didn't do it though. We were close. Massive
leg up having the VFL team. Before we get on to the preview for the GWS game, I thought we'd bring back the segment, the 3 things you've learnt from round 16. So, Trindacut, I'll start with you first, mate. What are the 3 things you learnt from round 16?
Probably the first one I'll roll with, and I forgot to write these down, but I did have a bit of a look at this earlier today, but Collingwood for me on Friday night, I think it was a pretty big eye-opener. I really expected them to bounce back, and I think that the fact that Hawthorn was able to get one over them again, and they looked like they were almost in disarray. So for me, that was to learn that they're maybe not they're not at the level that we sort of all expected them to be at. That was a pretty big surprise for me. I'll push on to Sparty. He can do one, and I'll get back to you with the second one.
Look, kind of putting us aside, obviously we can talk about us. We know we're coming. I think everyone else kind of probably stood up a little bit and went, "Oh, hang on, Richmond is still a contender." And the fact that I think I saw on Twitter the other day that we're probably sitting at almost the same position, same amount of wins, same percentage, everything. And from our premiership year just shows that we're still within a chance, that's for sure. But probably the biggest thing for me in terms of taking note was once again West Coast, probably from an AFL perspective, for what they were able to do in the conditions against Fremantle in a derby, really shows that they're going to be hard to beat again. Once again, similar to us, they've had blokes come in. Debutants in recent weeks, Jared Cameron probably being a really good example, come in and kicking goals literally. They're going to be a very, very hard team to beat, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. They look scary.
I thought that I thought that Brisbane Lions win over Giants was very convincing, and I was kind of cheeky putting them into something I learned, because I suspected most of this year that they under fakes they'd be pretty strong, but I think this is probably one of their most defining wins over the Giants on Sunday, and really, as I think the commentary world in general has been pretty consistent in saying they've earned their spot in the top four, and they're a team to look out for this year.
Yeah, agree. That was an amazing win. I watched that game, and I'm with you. That was actually one of my ones I had down too, that how impressive they were. There was just a really mature performance. And even last year, I was pretty adamant, and I know a lot of people were, but they weren't as bad as what their record suggested last year. So I'm shocked they're as high as they are, but I'm not. I thought they were going to be a lot better than they were last year, but they've far exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, it's almost, in a way, very similar to us, where probably our development early Damien Hardwick years progressed so much quicker than probably what we were expecting. And then we had that little bit of the lull, and maybe it might be perhaps next year, or maybe Brisbane will just continue going and can continue their upward trend. It's similar. I had them on my list of 3 things that I kind of took notice from this week in terms of, they're actually here, and they're going to be playing finals, and they, you don't want to be playing them particularly up at the Gabba if they end up top half of the bottom 8, or you know what I mean, within that 5 and 6 bracket. You definitely want to probably avoid them, because they're going to be a very exciting and tough team to beat in finals, that's for sure.
Yeah, did either of you have a number 3, or did we kind of all steal from each other?
Well, I'll let someone else go, because I reckon my third's probably an obvious one as well. So,
one thing that I've been saying this for a few weeks, and maybe this has probably solidified my thoughts. The Rising Star award is definitely not set in stone. A lot of people probably think Walsh is definitely a shoe-in. Sydney Stack once again showed that he's very, very, very close to running that award. Another really senior performance. He looks like a 100-game player, and I'm trying not to obviously be a biased Richmond supporter.
No, don't worry about it. Just do it. It's fine.
Yeah, because it's definitely the forum to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, watching the Melbourne and Carlton game, Walsh had a pretty quiet game, and probably has over the last few weeks as well, particularly. And Sydney Stack just once again just doing what he does best, and just playing really good footy. So yeah, really, really, I think that's probably a really exciting watch in the run home for the rest of the season, particularly how those 2 players go, because I think there might be a lot of votes now heading towards Sydney Stack. That's that way.
One of mine was actually about the Carlton-Melbourne game, kind of a 2-pronged one. Number one, that was one of the worst games of football I've ever watched in my life. And then I get to work on Monday, and I had someone tell me that apparently the first quarter and a half of the Hawthorn-Collingwood was worse. I couldn't understand how that was possible. But yeah,
that was a bad game to watch.
The skill levels on that game. Was it? Yeah.
Oh, it was bad.
But the skill levels on Melbourne and Carlton, it was just diabolical. Like, you could have played the Benny Hill music over the top of that first half, I reckon. Which led me to my kind of second-pronged point on that if we don't beat both of those teams convincingly, we don't deserve to play finals. No,
good point.
That's
But
point.
No, in Richmond, we'll probably only beat them by like 12 points or something.
I know. Yeah, they'll
just
play
get over the line. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think Wiedering. Did any of you see Wiedering's hit in the back of I reckon it's Petrarca's head? I can't believe that man walked off. He went into the back of Petrarca's head at full steam.
What about old mate Ben Cunnington? 5th time he's hit a bloke and gets another fine.
One of those was two. He got 2 in one match, I think, and that was like his 3rd and 4th. But I think now he can get referred directly to the tribunal. So, but he needs to pull his head in.
What happened to stamping it out?
The AFL just got soft in the knees. Probably got a good time. I think they went soft on Cochin. So, we'll probably reap the benefits of that, I guess. But they stopped going. They got soft on this kind of thing earlier in the year when they didn't suspend Gary Ablett twice. Well, they suspended him and overruled it, and then they didn't even bother the next week for the same thing. And then 2 weeks after that, then he gets a suspension.
Yeah, nothing should surprise us anymore.
That's a fail for me. That the whole MRO is, I wanted to have a bit of belief. It sounded like it was going to work well, but there's just no consistency at all, and I don't think it should just be a one-man show. They need to get some smarter heads involved.
The third thing that I learnt from this week, and I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard or seen this on social media, but apparently Collingwood have got injuries again. Tom Brown's mentioned it once or twice in the last 30 seconds, maybe. Of course. Apparently they've got some troubles down there, so just in case anyone wasn't aware, the Pies are once again having a bit of an issue with injuries, and old mate Tom Brown, that's all he tweets about these days.
He loves to be all over Collingwood.
Loves the Pies.
He got a good smack from Rewalt. I hope I see another one soon. He does give me the shits a little bit, Tom Brown. But Adam Treloar missed tonight's AFL 360 with a death in the family, so he might be in doubt this weekend. There hasn't really been any talk about it that I've seen, but and I've got him in my super coach as well, obviously, so that's going to piss me off if he's out, but these things happen.
All right, we'll push on to the preview for the big game this week against the Giants. Another must-win game, as we all know, with on the back of the Giants losing by 20 points to the Lions, which they're not going to be happy about. Probably not a good time to get a rebounding GWS, although they were rebounding last week, technically, I suppose, and they still lost. A win would put us into 5th position, and we would either be equal on points with 3rd or 4th, or we'd be one game behind 3rd and 4th at the end of the round. So a lot up for grabs, and it's just been amazing how some of these other results have worked out around us. And while it's probably made the gap for error smaller underneath us, because if we lose, and a few other teams, and Port Adelaide and Essendon win, we could go to 9th. So it's closed that gap, but it's also allowed us the opportunity to shoot for the stars and try and sneak into the top 4.
I don't think we have to worry about Adelaide. They're a basket case. That was going to be my third actual thing I learned on the weekend. Is well, I suspected for a long time that Adelaide would poo. They confirmed that with a disgraceful effort on the weekend in a derby match. So when the coach comes out and apologises for your team, I don't think he's going to be leading that club for much longer. But it's definitely a big game, and I think that the heat's really turn up on GWS this week, and I don't think that's going to slow down for the duration of the week as well. They'll really see us as redemption if they can get a win this weekend, because we've come off a couple of good wins. So we're going to have to play at our best, and Rewalt will be back in as well. So it could be a challenging game to get the forward line working with Lynch and Rewalt only playing their, was it 4th game or 5th game together?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
I think, though, if we can move the ball as quickly as we did inside the forward 50, like we did last week, I think that's going to eradicate a lot of those issues. Because that was the one thing I took from the Gold Coast game. I think we had 23 marks inside 50, which is a staggering number. And that only happens when you move the ball quick. And for so long now, we've had a really bad habit of when we mark it 75, 80 metres out, we'll wait 15, 20 seconds for everyone to get back. And then everyone gets double-teamed, triple-teamed, and it's really hard to take that clean mark. Whereas last week, we turned around, wheeled it around quickly, got it inside 50, and we could take those marks. And I think with Jack and Tom in the same forward line, providing they don't lead to the same space, if we move it quick enough, we could have two very good one-on-one prospects to kick the ball to, with the small forwards running in at their feet in case he hits the deck.
Well, that's Tom Lynch has said, when Tom Lynch got a little bit of heat earlier in the year, they said that his role isn't to be taking those big grabs. I mean, that's good when he does that, but his main job is to bring those to ground. I think with Rewalt there, I don't think he might be instructed to do that, but I think he'll be trying to take more grabs than he has in years past, because he's likely to get a number 2 opponent rather than number 1 opposition. So hopefully Jack gets up and takes a few big grabs without tearing his PCL again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely take advantage of the second defender. I think is going to be really key for Jack moving forward, and that's why we brought Tom Lynch in to have that. I guess that maybe that transition of Jack within his final years, and but he's been getting better as he gets older anyway. But definitely it's only going to be a strength for him to take that second defender and hopefully, perform really well on them rather than, as I said, taking the first defender.
But in all, like I sort of going back over my first point, having the second defender only works to our advantage if we get it in quick enough. If we hold it up, all Phil Davis is going to do is come across and spoil everything, or Heath Shaw, someone like that. So we have to make sure we're smart about it in the way we utilise whoever's on that second defender, because it's going to be something we should be able to exploit pretty easily if we're smart enough.
Hopefully we just go in there. Sorry, go on, Sparty.
No, you go.
I think that if we particularly on the weekend just gone, we didn't really pop it up too much. I mean, we did a little bit, but we got it in there, as you said, quickly and sharp too, so there wasn't a lot of time for their defence to react to we didn't really, what's the word I'm looking for? We didn't really tell them what we were going to do. Wasn't obvious, which way we're going to go in. So as long as we keep doing that, then we'll have a really good chance of getting some goals on the board with splitting their defence through two talls and Rewalt and Lynch.
Yeah, I was actually going to say it's probably credit to probably our back six and midfield more than anything. More so we don't have to have guys dropping back in defence to kind of fill those holes. We seem to really have solidified that over the last couple of weeks. Our midfield doesn't have to drop back. So in a way, I like to say, we're playing more positive football, playing more attacking kind of form of the football. So, as you said, we're able to move it quicker, and we're leaning towards, drifting into our attacking half rather than the defensive half, and waiting for blokes to come back into the forward half. As I said, holding up for that 15, 20 seconds. So, if we're playing that more positive type of football, we can have Lynch and Rewalt playing more as almost stay-at-home forwards. So then we've got targets up there, and then obviously having the quick, mosquito fleet we've got there with Bolton and Stack and Rioli pretty much at ground level, and Castagna as well. We keep forgetting about him most of the time, but ground level and run into the forward line, and obviously kicking our goals that way.
Last time we played the Giants, they knocked us off by 49 points. I know we had a little bit go against us with Jaden Short going off, and I think Cochrane didn't play the second half from memory, so we were 2 down. I actually think we were in the game up until that point in time, so they kind of ran over the top of us. Yeah. Asprey obviously back in, like you mentioned earlier on in the show, playing on Cameron's going to make such a big difference with the makeup of our backline. But those things aside, what do you think we need to be doing differently to get the win over the Giants? Because they are going to come out pretty hard, and they are going to want revenge for their loss last week.
I think that on the team sheets, the most influential thing this week is going to be obviously getting Rewalt back, but he said tonight on 360 he's coming back. But if GWS get both Whitfield and Mumford back this week, and they're both a good chance to come back, I think that'll challenge us in those respective areas. I think when it comes to stoppages, GWS are a very stoppage-oriented team, and Mumford will only enhance that for them. And so we'll have to do something around stoppages to ensure that they don't score so heavily from them on the weekend. We'll have to do something to combat that. And on top of that as well, we need to really play to our strengths and kick a lot of goals off of turnovers. That seems to be the way to win for us for a long time now. And I don't think we really did that against them earlier in the year. But if we can get to doing that again, and we punish Gold Coast on the weekend for their turnovers, and we need to keep doing that this weekend to get a win over the Giants.
Yeah, it just seems pressure, doesn't it? That's what Brisbane did. Just put the pressure on from the very first moment. Play, it keeps getting repeated, but it's tried and true. You play 4 quarters, and definitely that Richmond brand of football, what we've seen to become synonymous for over the last couple of years, particularly is high pressure football, and it's going to have to come from the very get go, from the first siren to the last.
You mentioned Mumford before, Trindacut. There was mixed reports on the Giants board. Obviously a lot of them would see the report that he was being tested for this week, but there was someone who said he was told that Mumford's probably still about 2 weeks away. Apparently he's still fairly sore, so don't know whether it's true or not, but hopefully, I would obviously rather him not play than play. Josh Kelly is obviously out with a calf for 3 weeks, which is a huge out for them. Josh Kelly's an absolute superstar, so missing him is going to hurt them quite a bit. Caniglio is down as a test. He was pretty ginger on the weekend, but played out the game.
Looks
Lockie Whitfield is a test with a collarbone. And
Lockie Whitfield's an interesting one, I think. I mean, he's touted as possibly coming back this week, but the Giants, I mean, if anyone plays Supercoach here, they'll know that the Giants injury list, and when they say they're coming back, can't be trusted at all this year. After I held on to Toby Green for 6 weeks. But Whitfield had a collarbone injury. It seems unlikely that he'd come back in the short time that he's had. I think he's only had 2 or 3 weeks, and it's generally a 4 to 6 week injury. So I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play Whitfield. And likewise, I'm not surprised to hear that there's talk that Mumford's out for 2 weeks, and they're still saying he's a test.
Because, I mean, we're going to be pretty physical, and there's no doubt about it. So it would be pretty risky on their part to put Whitfield in that early on and run the risk of extended injury.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, they don't seem to be taking many risks in that area with their players, so if there's any risk, I don't think they'll play. But that means that I feel like if he plays, there probably isn't any risk, and look out, the Mumford hurts people. That's just what he does.
Yeah, yep. We'll get Sydney Stacks to run through him first.
I'd like to see that.
He definitely tried.
He's got no fear. He'll have a crack.
Yep.
It'll bounce off of him into the level 4.
And now to the $1 million question. The question that I've put out on Twitter a few times already and still haven't really got a answer, or a good answer anyway. Jack Riewoldt's obviously coming back in for us. Who is going out? Now, I mean, the obvious one is Egg, unfortunately, as much as we loved his debut. But people don't seem to be throwing up his name. The most common name that I keep seeing coming up saying that's going to be dropped for Jack Riewoldt is Chol. And I think that is just crazy because we can't go into a game without a second ruck. Jack and Tom Lynch aren't going to go into the centre square and ruck when Soldo's off the ground. So for me, I think Chol stays. I think it's a simple Jack for Egg. And we just reshuffle a little bit down back.
Yeah, we really need Sean Grigg back as that second ruckman, I think. We're really missing him in that role, that's for sure. Yeah, look, I'm probably with that as well, with Ed going out. Once again, great debut, did everything right. But when you're getting dropped with arguably one of our top 5 players, or definitely top 5 players. So yeah, look, it's he'll take a lot from this experience. Obviously, learn a lot. He'll be able to go back and keep working his craft at VFL level. But yeah, overall, look, really strong performance from everyone there. The only other one I'd probably consider maybe Rioli, just because he hasn't been as strong within the side over recent weeks. Once again, another small type of player. They might want to just give him some time off, maybe, because he's been in and out of the side a bit. So whether it's injury or something else that he's kind of working on. But yeah, they're probably the 2 players I'd probably say to get dropped. And because if Egg gets dropped, I'd expect Stack to go back into that role off the half-back and then Jack to go forward if that was the case. Last
year, Shai Bolton got in the ruck against the Giants on 2 occasions. So it's Barbie Chol for me. I just think that tall for a tall. Riewolt's done ruck work before. I know he's coming back from a PCL injury, but Solder's been doing a pretty good job, almost as a sole ruckman. So I would think that they drop Chol back to the 2s for Riewoldt.
Gee, I reckon that's asking for trouble. Just with the 6-6-6 rule, I just don't like giving opposition midfield, especially as good as GWS is, almost free rein at getting the ball inside quickly to a quality forward line under no pressure. I just reckon that's asking for trouble. If the 6-6-6 rule wasn't in place and we could still set up behind the ball, it wouldn't matter. We could put whoever we want in there. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's flirting with a lot of danger. But just a shit time to be a selector, I reckon. He's going to have a lot of headaches. And then you've got Josh Caddy as well. I mean, Caddy's probably going to be right to go. I'm not too sure he walks straight back into the team at the moment, to be honest.
Oh, I think you'd make room for him. I think you'd have to make some room for him. He's just he's got a bit of that grunt, I think, that we need. Gets his head over it, and I think he hurts blokes too if he wants to. If Mumford plays, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Chol stayed in. and one of the other boys went out for Rewalt. But yeah.
Well, if Caddy was to come in, who would go out? And I don't think it can be a small forward because we can't afford to lose the pace up front. For me, it kind of looks like on paper a direct swap with someone like a Jack Graham, but he's done a really good job running with plays the last few weeks. And I'd like to see him do it again this week.
I don't know who would. I mean, I think our selectors are going to have a big headache, as you said. I got Buckley's chance of being able to determine who we're going to get rid of for Caddy. What Sparty said, Rioli's been in some pretty poor form, might need to run in the twos. I love seeing him out there, though. He's something special, so I don't know what they'll do.
Look, if Caddy was to come back in this week, that's probably when I'd start to question whether maybe Marby or Chol might be the one to go out. Almost playing once again as a bit of a tall forward. Caddy, I think, has pinch hit in the ruck as well a couple of times, so almost taking over that Sean Grigg role as that small second ruckman. But yeah, look, I think they can prepare as much thinking that Mumford will play, but I don't think it will really affect their selection too much. It's probably more on work, making sure that our system holds up more than anything, rather than kind of working towards their selections.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that we typically will only ever worry about what we can control, and that's why we've been fairly successful. We haven't worried too much about what other teams are going to do. We just play our own game and back our own system in, to be very cliched.
Yep, that's it.
All right, before we let you both go, we better get a tip including margin. Sparty, I'll start with you first.
I think we're pretty primed to get the wins. So I'm fairly confident, obviously, with the outs for GWS, and we're in good form. They're probably on the downwards form. Played at the MCG as well. The start of our residency for the rest of the year as well, which is going to be really good for us leading into the finals. But I think it's going to be cold, wet, kind of Sunday afternoon here in Melbourne. So probably low scoring game. I'd probably pick us by about 14 points.
And Trindacut?
Similar thinking. Their outs are pretty significant. I think Mumford's a big in for them if he gets his way back in, but we'll assume that he doesn't, and I'll say Richmond by 34.
Ooh,
I think it'll be close. Nice. I think it'll be close until the third quarter, and we'll go back to a bit of our 2017 form of just running over the top of them at the end.
That would send a big statement, I reckon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I reckon we'll get up. I'll probably split the difference to go in the middle. I'll say by about 20 to 25 points. But similar to you, I think it might be a late run away that we get. But if it happens to be a bigger one over 30, that would be a huge message. All right.
We're coming.
Absolutely. A reminder, the game is on Sunday, July 14th at the MCG at 1:10. Make sure we all get down there. Make it a bit of a fortress. There'll be about 5 Giant supporters there, so make them feel unwelcome by screaming as loud as you can without getting kicked out, of course. We don't want the PC brigade kicking people out for clapping and cheering, but make sure we're down there with full voice.
They've all been shipped back off. Didn't you hear about the security guard issue?
Oh, no, I didn't. That's not surprising. That was a bit of a kerfuffle, wasn't it? But hopefully the boys can get another one to make it 3 in a row and really make a charge for the top 4. So, Trindacut and Sparty, thanks so much, guys, for coming on tonight. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No worries. Until next time, go Tigers. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Richmond Bigfooty Tigercast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and YouTube so you can follow all the roast and toast, the reviews and previews, and all topics Richmond. Also keep an ear out for our special episodes of interviews with past players. Go Tigers.